Welcome back, guys. We got a couple things to do today on my powder stream here. The past 2 weeks we had a lot of snow. We got about 36 inches, which is a fair amount for us around here in Pennsylvania. But we had a lot of fun. We rode our sleds pretty hard, and of course when you ride stuff it breaks or fails sometimes. So there's a couple things you have to change on this sled before the next snowstorm, and one of those is taking the secondary clutch off and changing the spring on it. So we're going to do that now, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's get started. So here we are at the clutch here. We're going to be doing taking the secondary clutch off in just a bit, but I wanted to show you the pipes. As you can see, the foam melted right there, and it messed up all the pipes. So that wasn't a good thing. And also, if you look on the other side, or up here, that all the foil came off our foam. So if you're going to put that foam on, you might want to just take the foil off right away, because it just melts the adhesive off and then the foil falls off. But hopefully the foam itself will last longer. But if we come to the other side, you can see my recoil starter right there is not on, and that's because I blew it up. I wasn't working right, and then when I went to start it the next time, it just pulled the rope right out, and so I took it apart and there was plastic shreds everywhere. I'll show you those in a bit, but that didn't mess up my starter cup, just the starter assembly itself and the plastic sheave. But I'm getting a replacement, so I'll show you how to replace that once the parts come in. But let's go back to the clutch. Is over here. Go ahead and pop out your pin. Take off your belt. Pretty much the best way to do this is just ride the belt up on the top of the secondary and then just rotate the whole thing around. Now a good way to get these belts off is after you get the belt up on the secondary top, just rotate the primary. Also, I jacked up the back of my sled just a little bit so the track can spin without hitting the ground. Just rotate your primary clutch. Pop your belt off the side, and then you should be able to, like that. I recommend jacking up your back of your sled, especially if you're going to be changing the belt out a lot or messing with the clutch's alignment, and you have to take your belt off a lot. It just makes it a lot easier. Now while you're in here, we might as well clean our clutches. As you can see, that was a lot of belt dust, and the reason for that is I put a brand new belt on, and when you put a new belt on, it'll have to get broken in. And pretty much the only way to do that is to ride it and wear the belt down a little bit. So that's what the clutch dust is from, and we'll clean that up with some brake cleaner later. But next off, we've got to get our secondary off. That's a 1/2-inch bolt or socket on this sled. But if your clutch just rotates, which it should rotate very freely, just put your parking brake on, and you should be able to take the bolt right out without it slipping at all. Now this is a clutch setup that is called a floating clutch, which means the secondary can actually move back and forth about a quarter or just a little bit less than a quarter of an inch. So if your clutch has a little bit of play in it, don't worry, just check it, make sure it's to see if it's a free floating clutch. Here's your bolt, and then there'll be a thin washer or a thick washer, and then there'll be another thin washer with a large inner diameter hole that goes on. Make sure you don't lose them. And your clutch will come right off, and also inside it will be a aluminum spacer. And you want to make sure that you keep these greased, because the clutch is obviously moving back and forth, and you want it to move freely. There'll also be a key in your jack shaft that you'll have to take out, just like that. Set that to the side. And if your clutch doesn't come off by itself, it's probably because you need to spread your belly pan. So this bolt right here, just take it out, take the nut off of that, and you'll be able to spread your belly pan out a little bit. There you go. That should spread out. You'll be able to wheel your clutch off, drop it down, and there you go. Clutch is off. So let's take it over to the workbench, clean it up, and replace that spring. Alright, got our secondary clutch here, and the first thing I have to do is take out these 3 lock nuts. You can use a ratchet for this. Just loosen them up a bit. The plate should keep pushing up against, tight up against them, and then just turn them slowly off. Just keep downward pressure on, put a little pressure on it so you can hold the plate on while you take the nuts off. There you go. We got the 3 bolts taken out, or 3 nuts taken off, and it popped apart. You can use a compression tool to help hold the tension while you take the 3 nuts off, and then slowly let the tension off. But I'll use one later to put it back together. Just wiggle your plate off. Your spring comes out. These 3 bolts hold on the helix. If you want to take the helix off, if you lift up the outer sheave, you'll notice there's the 3 shims on this one. These shims are used to adjust the ride height of the belt when it's stopped. And then you have your inner sheave. But we're going to be taking all of these sheaves and we're going to cleaning them up. You don't have to do this, but you can just clean them with carb cleaner. But since we have a new belt and we broke it in, there's going to be belt dust left over, and we want to clean that all off. So I'm going to go clean this up and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Alright, I got the sheaves cleaned up. There's the inside sheave, the outer sheave. Cleaned up very nicely, all that black belt dust off. If you are using any kind of soap after you're done cleaning up the clutch, make sure you use like dish soap on the sheave. That way you get any oil or residue from the degreaser off, or whatever you're using to clean it. But now if you do remember, on my first or second videos, I had done a secondary clutch assembly on a clutch right like this, but I figured I'd do another video, a little better video on assembling a secondary clutch. So that's what this video is going to be about. But we're going to be changing out the spring from the stock yellow one to a white one. Now there's a little bit of difference. I believe the yellow one's just a tad taller. Maybe not. But the white one is a little bit stiffer from the. I checked it up on the charts. I forget the spec exactly, but it is a stiffer spring, so therefore it will it'll have a little bit. It'll stay in lower gear a little bit longer. And that's kind of what you want if your engine has a little bit lower torque, or if you want a slower upshift. So let's get busy assembling this clutch. Don't forget your 3 shims in the middle. Best way to do this is just put them over the hole, line them up the best you can. Put your outer sheave, line it up with the pegs, and then line it up with the shims. Make sure they don't fall out. Grab your, we have our helix we need to put back on. Put it on, line the bolt holes up, and go ahead and torque down these Allen head bolts. You'll want to torque these up the spec. Can't remember the spec off the top of my head right now, but I'll torque them up later before I put the clutch on the sled. Just tighten them up for now, and torque them later. Next, grab your spring. There should be a hole in the outer sheave for it to go in. Just press it in. And then, of course, your upper plate. Now, I'm going to put this in the center hole to begin with, because I'm not totally sure on where it needs to be but for the spring, but I can change it later after I ride the sled and check where my RPMs are, and then I can adjust it from there. But let me grab my compression tool and we can compress this and put it together. This here is my compression tool. It's basically a piece of threaded rod welded to a piece of metal on top of a board, so I have a little bit of leverage or something to clamp down. take your clutch, take the whole assembly, place it over the threaded rod, come up the center, and then you can compress it. You'll need some kind of washer to go over the thing, over the cover, and then of course your nut. You can buy compression tools, but you can make them just as easily. So basically just go ahead and torque down this nut until you're where you need to be. I'm just going to put a vice grip on here so I have a little bit of a handle. There you go, slide it in there. And then just go ahead and wind it down. Now you don't want to go too far because you have to get the buttons on the clutch cover over top of the ramps, and you have to twist it at the same time. There we go. Took a little bit of effort to get the buttons on the far side of the clutch or the helix, but we did it. And then just go ahead and compress it down, and it will slowly ramp down. Now you want to line these holes like that. Just lift up the inner sheave. Should stick right through. Grab your lock nuts. Get them started as far as you can. You don't have to compress the clutch the whole way, just enough to get your lock nuts started a good ways. And don't just start them with one thread. Make sure they're on there pretty good, because there's quite a lot of tension on there. And go ahead and through the vice grip, grab a ratchet, and just tighten these down for now. Now this clutch is fairly easy to put together. Basically 3 nuts that you have to get on. There's some of the other clutches are a little bit more complicated, to have snap rings, etc. to hold them together, but this one's fairly easy. But if you don't know how to put it together, make sure you check out a video or a manual or something to put it together right, otherwise it won't work. But if you did this right, you can see the buttons right here are pressing against the helix, and if you turn the clutch or spread it, it'll release it, it'll pull the buttons away from the helix, but then as soon as you let go, they press back up against the helix. So if it's not doing that, or it's on the buttons are not even on the ramp, then you did something wrong. You have to take it apart and fix it. Now these 5 holes right here, or sometimes 6 or 7 holes, depending on your clutch, they'll adjust the RPM depending on what hole the spring is in. So each hole is around 100 RPMs on some clutches. Some clutches it's like 250 RPMs, but again it varies. So you want to make sure your sled is running at the RPM it's meant for to get the best power and the most speed out of it. So this clutch is all put together and cleaned up. We can put it back on the sled. So let's go do that. Alright, we're back to the sled here, and you can see our jack shaft right here, as well as all our washers. Make sure that none of those fell off or came off in any way. But we got to lube the shaft right here, so just use a little grease. I use marine grease for this on all my sleds, because it just lasts longer and is a lot more water resistant. Just take a fair amount and lube the shaft. You don't want to go crazy, just want to put a nice thin layer the whole way around. Next, grab your clutch. And you'll need your keyway in just a second, so have that ready to go. Spread your belly pan if you need. Slide your clutch on. It should slide on pretty easily because of the grease. You also want to grease up your key, but go ahead and put that on now. Line it up with your clutch. There we go. Slide your key in and your clutch in. Now there will probably be grease that builds up in front of the clutch. Just want to wipe that all off, because the less grease you have, the better, as it won't attract belt dust. Just wipe off any extra. Slide your clutch on the rest of the way. Next, you'll need your aluminum washer or spacer. It looks like this. You'll also want to lube that up a little bit. Put that on. It should stick out of your clutch just a little bit because this is a free float clutch. Next, you'll need your clutch bolt with a small washer, then a fat washer, then a thin large washer. Let's put all those on. That thin larger washer goes on up against the clutch, and then your fat washer holds on that spacer. Go ahead and tighten up your bolt. Now there is a clutch spec or a torque spec for this. Make sure you torque it spec. Again, if your clutch rotates, which it should, go ahead and put your parking brake on. Tighten that up. The torque spec for this clutch is 19 to 24 pounds, so we'll just go somewhere in the middle, around 22 pounds, 21, 22 pounds. And there we are, at 23 pounds. After that, you can go ahead and put your belt on. You may want to clean your belt after it's broken in, or for sure clean your other primary sheave. But I'm going to clean my primary quick. I'm just going to wipe it down with some brake cleaner, and then I'll put our belt on.